Hey everybody! Well, I said after the Cotton Bowl game that if anything breaking news-wise as far as Oklahoma athletics occurred between then and July, I'd come on and talk about it. Well, a couple of things have happened in terms of OU that is definitely worthy of a chit-chat for a few minutes. Before I get into Oklahoma football in terms of Bob Stoops firing a couple of assistants, which he did this past February, and hiring a couple of assistants, shaking things up a little bit, let's first of all talk about Oklahoma basketball. That's right, the OU men's team, which has definitely surprised a lot of people by and large this season. My gosh, I must be thinking that we went back into a time capsule. You know that? 18-9. I tell you what, it's been one heck of a year for Lon Kruger's squad. I don't think anybody, even the most optimistic OU basketball fan, could have pictured a year in which they're still projected to go to the NCAA tournament. No way at all, especially back in the earlier part of the year when they lost at home to Stephen F. Austin. I'll talk about a little about that in a second, but yeah, at that point of the year, you didn't think, well, you probably thought this year's going to be like the previous few in which the Sooners were not only not going to play in any postseason tournament of any kind, but be on their way to another losing campaign and could pretty much think ahead to football to where you can have some success. But Lon Kruger, give him credit. This is why Joe Castiglione paid Lon $2 million a year to get Oklahoma back to a winning tradition in terms of winning on the hardwood. And boy, have they been able to do that this year. Beating Kansas, beating Oklahoma State, sweeping Baylor. They have done a marvelous job. Of course, there's no question, we'll talk about this in a little bit, the disappointing loss against Texas just a few nights ago. But still, on the whole, the Sooners are still projected to go to March Madness. And isn't that something? I thought that this year that would be impossible the way things were looking at one point during the year. But as we look at it, Stephen F. Austin, right now they've only lost 3 games the whole year, and right now could very well win their league. And by the way, another marquee win that Oklahoma's had that not too many people are talking about, a win against Ohio U. And Ohio U, they're amongst the top team in their league right now, the MAC. And Ohio, they've had recent success in the NCAA tournament. So that's an underrated win right there for the Sooners. I mean, it's not just that, but look at Oklahoma in terms of their RPI rating. It's pretty high. It's in the top 30. Strength of schedule is very high. The Sooners, in terms of their overall body of work, as far as their losses, they lost to Arkansas, and Arkansas is very hard to beat at home, and the Razorbacks are trying to get into the NCAA tournament. They're borderline right now, but they have a shot. Losing at Gonzaga, no shame in that. Gonzaga, by the way, could very well be the #1 team in the country come the next poll this upcoming week because Indiana and Duke both lost this past week. So you look at the overall body of work that Oklahoma has put together, and they haven't been playing a bunch of cupcakes overall. They've played a pretty tough and demanding schedule, and are 18-9, much better than what we've seen in previous years. Not since the Blake Griffin era of 2009 have we seen an Oklahoma team this good. What's turned it around? I think pretty much has been senior leadership, and you have to give it up to Stephen Pledger, Andrew Fitzgerald, and the seniors on this team for sticking it out during that Jeff Capel era when it was dismal for Oklahoma basketball during those latter years in which Capel, of course, lost his job a couple of years ago, not just because OU wasn't playing very well, but, of course, there were NCAA issues as well, and, of course, OU had to be able to weather the storm through that, plus during the Kelvin Sampson era, surviving those sanctions as well. Even though it wasn't those players' faults, they still had to handle the penalties from that too. So they've been able to come almost full circle from that, and you can see now that these seniors were able to hang in there. They gave Lon Kruger their undivided attention, and it's paying off. So those two guys, and you see the job also too that Romero Osby's done, leading the team in both points and rebounding, and Sam Grooms, how his game has been revived. He was a starter last year. Didn't start earlier this year because he was struggling, but he's come off the bench and done a marvelous job, and they needed him because the point guard, Buddy Hield, injured his foot. Hopefully they'll get him back by the time the Big 12 tournament arrives here pretty soon. But Grooms, his game has been revived big time, especially with his jump shot. OU, as a matter of fact, they're becoming a better shooting team from the outside from three-point range, a more dependable team when it comes to outside shooting. We saw that in that rematch against Kansas in Norman a few weeks ago in that exciting victory in which at that time Kansas was ranked 5th in the country. And then the rebounding has greatly improved as well. And speaking of size, too, you have to really give it up to Amat Mbai, who's been a highlight reel to transfer, has done a marvelous job. He's been a dunking machine for the Sooners, an athletic specimen. This Oklahoma team has had terrific chemistry, and again, Lon Kruger deserves a lot of credit for the job that he has done. Again, this is why Castiglione brought him in and had to pay him serious bucks, but you could see that it's paying off. And of course, you feel bad for the Sooners blowing a 22-point lead with 7.5 minutes to go in Austin against Texas, who's having the worst year under Rick Barnes. But it goes to show you that it's like that old saying, if you stop scoring on us, we'll stop scoring on you. And for Oklahoma, they should have never have taken their foot off the pedal, off that gas pedal. They did. And you give credit to Texas for not quitting, for hanging in there, for getting hot. But at the same time, though, anybody who watched the game knows this, Oklahoma helped them too. And Texas came from all the way back, including hitting that 15-foot shot as time expired. And I'll tell you what, Kabongo, that guy, serving a 23-game suspension for Texas, having him back makes a difference for the Longhorns. They're 3-2 with him. Much different team without him. And Texas had the momentum entering overtime, and OU didn't know what hit them. And by the time they did, it was over, and OU lost a heartbreaker. You can't remember being that sick in quite a while after watching an OU game. But still, that's where OU has to learn to finish games, and we're going to find out how Oklahoma responds here pretty soon when they host Iowa State on March the 2nd. But still, overall, not going to rip Oklahoma too much for that Texas loss because it's been an overall great year. They've overachieved. They've done great things. Barring a complete collapse, it does look like the Sooners are headed to March Madness. They're 18-9 even as we speak on March the 1st. They are 9-6 in Big 12 play with 3 games to go. They host Iowa State. They'll host West Virginia in a few days, and they'll close out at TCU. The Sooners should be primed to get at least 2 wins during that final 3-game stretch. The Iowa State game figures to be the toughest of the 3. That Iowa State game earlier in the year when they played at Ames was easily Oklahoma's worst game in Big 12 play this year. This past game that they played against Texas was easily the most disappointing game. They got to learn to finish off games. They got to learn to stay out of foul trouble. If they can do that, then the Sooner team should be primed to go to the NCAA tournament. And they can stay out of foul trouble and finish games. They're capable of, who knows, maybe making a little noise in the process. So great job by Lon Kruger and the OU men's basketball team. Proud of you. Talking about football real quick. February, of course, rocky month for both Jackie Shipp and Bruce Kittle. Couple of assistants for Oklahoma football. Both guys losing their jobs as Bob Stoops fired them both. Sooners fans, I'm telling you, Bob Stoops is serious. This is a guy that prior to January of 2012 had never fired an assistant on his staff. Then in January of 12, we saw him fire Willie Martinez, the defensive back coach. Well, Shipp, who had been there since 1999, loses his job as defensive line coach. And Bruce Kittle on the offensive line, he's gone as well. You can call it lack of development, or you can call it not doing a good job in recruiting. I think it's a combination of both. So both are gone. And then, of course, James Patton, a few days earlier, he left. So now you have some vacancies. Well, it looks like the vacancies are filled, at least 2 of them. Bill Benningbaugh, the offensive line coach from West Virginia, he now comes to Norman to occupy that same position. I like the move because I love what West Virginia did on offense in recent years. That will only help in that capacity. Hopefully he can recruit as well. One guy we know that can recruit is Jerry Montgomery, the defensive line coach from Michigan. Heard that he's a wonderful recruiter, one heck of a recruiter. And now he will be the defensive line coach for the Sooners. So that is a big hire for Bob Stoops. Look, Bob was terrific friends with Shipp and with Kittle, I'm sure with Patton as well, but he knows there's a fine line between friendships and also being able to get the job done. And he knew that despite being friends with these former assistants, he knew that he had to make a business decision and make it business strictly. That's what he had to do. That's what he did. And now he knows it's time to move forward. In terms of recruiting, since we didn't really have a recruiting show back in early February, if you're wondering how Oklahoma did, if you didn't keep up with recruiting at all, pretty much as far as how OU did in recruiting, it was a good class. I would say good, not great, top 15 class. They and Texas were probably in the top 15, top 20, depending on if you look at Rivals.com or ESPN.com as far as who had the upper edge. But those 2 schools were easily the top 2 in the Big 12, but paled in comparison nationally to the Alabamas, LSUs, Notre Dames, and Floridas of the world. In terms of the best players that Oklahoma got, Probably Hatari Bird, the safety out of the, I believe, the Fresno, California area. He's probably the most talented of the bunch that we've seen. He plays safety, could play right away. Remember, OU lost both DeMontre Hurst as well as Tony Jefferson, who left early for the NFL. Bird could end up playing right away. I've heard great things about him. Also, too, Keith Ford, running back out of Cypress, Texas. Very talented running back. Don't know if he'll get redshirted. Remember, OU is very deep in the backfield. And remember, Alex Ross from Jinx, he redshirted last year, so I'm sure he'll play. So maybe this will be a redshirt year for Ford, but who knows? But Ford, spectacular high school running back, one of the best in the country. OU fortunate to get that guy, too. Another guy OU's fortunate to get, a couple of defensive ends, by the way. Maybe the most talented Oklahoma high school recruit that OU has is, and this guy they've had for a while now, commit, DJ Ward out of sophomore high school, very quick defensive end. And another defensive end that they got as well was Matt Demon out of Katy, Texas, out of the greater Houston area. And speaking of the Houston area, out of Stratford, Texas, another guy too was Christian Damler too, out of the Houston Stratford area, 6 feet 6 inches tall, offensive lineman there who originally was committed to Arizona State, but back in, I think, November of last year, decommitted from them and committed to Oklahoma. If you're OU, you can't have near enough offensive linemen. The more, the merrier. And he, again, is 6 feet 6 inches tall. And then a wide receiver out of the Oklahoma area. In fact, a couple of wide receivers out of the greater Tulsa area, out of Booker T, Dominic Alexander. And then another one, too, Stanbon Taylor, actually an all-purpose player. And both of these guys I'm pretty fired up for Oklahoma to have. Remember the Sooners losing Kenny Stills early. By the way, did you hear that Stills ran a 4.340 at the NFL Combines? Yeah, his stock is shooting up. Probably made the wise decision to leave early, although I'm missing the guy already. But you have Taylor and Alexander, a couple of recruits out of the greater Tulsa area. They signed on the dotted line to play for Oklahoma. And quarterback Cody Thomas out of Colleyville, Texas, commit to Oklahoma, ranked in the top 7 amongst most of the high school publications. Runs, by the way, a 4.540, and he plays quarterback. So I don't know if he'll figure into the quarterback mix, which right now figures to be wide open, but Cody Thomas commits to Oklahoma too. So fantastic players from what I've broken down. But overall, I don't rate this a great recruiting class. Oklahoma needed to get quality linebackers, and to me, it doesn't look like they did. That's the one area that Oklahoma right now really is suffering in, is getting those quality linebackers. And remember that this is an area where in recent years they've really digressed in, so we'll see how they can do. Maybe the coaching change will help, but the bottom line is these Sooner coaches, especially with the new ones, they've really got to hammer it home that these OU players, the OU players that they want to get, sometimes it's a matter of really getting out there and really making yourself known. Players these days don't just come to your school out of tradition. They don't really come to your school because of television. Almost every school these days is on television every week. You got to use a different selling point now. And for these Sooner coaches, I'll be curious to see what they do to try to get these 5-star players to come to Oklahoma, like they used to. We'll see what angle these coaches, including Bob Stoops, uses from this moment forward. Again, congrats to the OU basketball team. Despite the setback in Austin against Texas, it still can't dampen what's been a good year so far, and hopefully the Sooners can finish out the regular season strong and have a good showing in the Big 12 tournament, so that way they can punch their ticket for the NCAA tournament. Right now, again, the Sooners are 18-9 and 9-6 in Big 12 play, which I think right now is tied for 3rd with Iowa State. Right now, trailing, I think it's tied for 4th with Iowa State, trailing K-State, Kansas, and Oklahoma State in the Big 12 standings. So for the Sooners basketball team, heck of a job by Lon Kruger and company. And for OU football, spring game is coming up, I believe, in late March or early April, something like that. And we'll see how they look, especially with that quarterback battle going on between McKnight, Thompson, and, of course, Blake Bell, who right now probably would have the slight edge over the other two. That does it for now. Boomer Sooner.